On a town hall tour in Wisconsin, one of the stops, the town of Shellsburg. Over the last 2 weeks, Congressman Mark Pocan, a Democrat, has traveled across his district to talk to his constituents about health care, education and...
Does anyone here want to talk about impeachment? No. Okay. No? Good. We have a motive, we have a crime, we have a confession, and we have evidence, right? I mean, it's pretty direct.
Like many of his fellow Democrats, the congressman supports the impeachment inquiry.
Yes.
But here in his district, among farmers and blue-collar workers, he is facing some tough questions.
What are your Republican colleagues saying? You know, what's the other
Well, we
side
know
of the
what Ron
story?
Johnson
How
is
are they?
Unfortunately, what I've seen is more of them decide to just leave rather than say anything, because there's a lot of pressure on them, especially if they are running for re-election. Yes.
The only problem with everything that's going on in the House is that to get serious, you have to have so much more bad stuff come out so that there becomes a tipping point in the Senate. Until the Senate reaches the tipping point, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah. This is a president who thinks he's above the law. He's the guy who told us he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. He's just trying to prove it now.
But
right?
his base is sticking with him.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it again. Please reach out to us if we can be helpful. Thank you.
Explaining the impeachment inquiry to voters means walking a tightrope for Democrats in swing states like Wisconsin. According to recent polls, the support for the decision to look into Donald Trump's conduct has grown. But at the same time, many Republicans still see it as a political move to bring down their president. And it appears, at least for now, that impeachment has only widened the existing partisan divide. The city of Vormann, Wisconsin. Congressman Glenn Grothman, a Republican, has been representing this district for 5 years. He stands by the president.
I think there are too many people who, ever since Donald Trump was sworn in, spend all their time trying to kick him out, rather than dealing with issues that should be dealt with now and then just trying to beat him in the next election.
But shortly after the beginning of his town hall, the congressman is being grilled by his constituents on the issue.
So for Republicans to go into another country and ask to interfere with our elections is wrong. And you know it's wrong. Our votes should count.
I feel that the president's using his political power for political and personal gain. I also believe it's important to uphold our Constitution and that no one's above the law. So have you stated support for the impeachment for Donald Trump for asking a foreign government to interfere in our elections?
That I don't think we've ever had a president who has had to put up with more people trying to remove him from office almost from the day he was sworn in.
I think there's a lot of people out there like me that really appreciate everything Trump has done, and I think people will be surprised when he is voted back in with a big majority.
Re-elected or impeached and convicted, the dispute about that is likely to intensify, and not only in battleground Wisconsin.
Well, joining us now is Boris Vormann. He's a professor of political science from Bard College here in Berlin. Good to see you again, Boris. What do you make of that White House letter and Rudy Giuliani's defense of it?
They're trying to find a footing and trying to find a strategy to counter the impeachment trial. They're trying to portray Trump as transparent, also pointing out that some basic procedural rights have been offended, and I think this will be ultimately for lawyers to clarify. They're also trying to do something which is not ultimately surprising, which is to render it into a partisan issue, to say the Democrats are basically trying to undo the presidential election of 2016. But if that were a legitimate claim, impeachment as a procedure basically would be out the window.
How much do you think that this White House decision, this move to block people from testifying, the stated unwillingness to cooperate, how much do you think this will affect the impeachment inquiry?
Well, I mean, the first intuition would be that obviously it undermines it because it will make it difficult for Adam Schiff to interview and subpoena witnesses. But at the same time, it offers a second impeachable offense, which is obstruction of the Congress, which could make the case much stronger.
Now, does this show that Trump actually has a real strategy for fighting the impeachment inquiry, or is this just a one tactical move that we can expect and not really knowing what's coming next?
I think the latter is probably the correct answer. I mean, it tries to look or to appear as though there was such a long-term strategy. But if we think back and think about the first 3 years in office, there has not been a long-term strategy in any policy field, really. Even though probably I should be a little more careful in making this kind of a claim. But I think there's a lot of tactical actions and there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of movements that make it difficult to come to a final conclusion here.
Now, this is early days in the impeachment process. This could drag on for quite some time. So we're just seeing the opening salvos, really. Looking at precedent in impeachment processes before, how do you see this unfolding over the weeks and months to come?
Well, we don't have many precedents. We also have to emphasize that the impeachment has never worked out in U.S. history. The only time it didn't, because Nixon anticipated the move and stepped back from his office. So it's a very complicated set of measures also to not threaten the office of the presidency. It needs a majority in the House and then a 2/3 majority in the Senate, which is very unlikely. So it's going to drag on. Some people even wonder if it will drag on beyond the presidency of Trump's. What we can say, however, in comparison to the Mueller report, it seems to be much more pointed and much more concerted in the actions that we're seeing. Mueller was much more of a dragged out process over months and months.
Boris, thank you very much for your insights there. As Boris Vormann, professor of political science at Bard College here in Berlin.